Hey guys, I'm Ryan and this is Far East Fusion, the show where I take a Western dish and a dish that I fell in love with while living in Asia and I fuse them together. Today I had a request from my significant other, my partner in crime. Sarah wanted something sweet. She wanted a dessert. But in Asia, desserts are not really that popular. Most Asian countries prefer some fruit after a meal or some mixture of sugar and beans. I'm not really a dessert guy. I hate baking. After a meal, I prefer a single square of high-quality chocolate to a piece of cake or something. But I've agreed to attempt Youtiao eclairs. You probably already know what an eclair is, a French pastry. It's normally made with choux pastry, a really airy dough made with almost equal parts butter to flour. Then it's filled with a custard or whipped cream and topped with usually a chocolate icing. I'm going to totally bastardize this favorite French dessert though. A youtiao is a deep-fried stick of dough. The name youtiao in Chinese actually means oil stick. This, my friends, is not a recipe, this is creativity. I've never made youtiao eclairs before, so don't be surprised if I screw it up and it turns out terribly. In fact, in my last video, I think I swore off dough.
I will remember you.
We haven't really been getting along lately. It's a shame because in episode 1 we were getting along really well. I was practically a dough master. Now that I think about it, it wasn't really the dough, it was the yeast. And this dough contains no yeast, so maybe I'll be okay. Anyways, the total resting time for youtiao dough is around 4.5 hours. So I need to get started on these right away if we want to eat them before the sun goes down and I turn into a werewolf. From all the research I've done on how to make youtiao, I kept reading that it's hard to do and it's easy to screw up. The first step to success is adding the appropriate amount of water to the flour. I have 500 grams of all-purpose flour. I'll add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, mix it up, and make a well for our liquid. So how much water should we put into this? We know that flour absorbs water to create a dough. The consistency of our dough will depend on how much water is absorbed. There are 3 things in flour that affect the absorption of water: starch, proteins, and pentosins. Let's talk the proteins and forget the other 2 for now. The more proteins in the flour, the more water it will absorb. If you look on the back of your flour package, some packages of flour will actually state what percentage of proteins are in the flour, but if it doesn't, we can still figure it out by looking at the daily serving section. We just need to divide the amount of protein in a serving by the size of the serving. So 4 grams in a serving divided by the serving size, 30 grams, equals 0.13. So the flour is 13% protein. A typical all-purpose flour is around 9 to 12%, so this flour actually has a higher protein content than normal. It's closer to a bread flour, which is usually around 12 to 13% proteins. Like I said, more proteins mean more water absorption, so to make up for it, I'm going to add a bit more water than I normally would. The recipe calls for 300 milliliters of water. I'll just add a smidge over that, around 320 milliliters. If your flour is 10 to 11% proteins, just add 300 milliliters of water. Moving on, I'm measuring out 5 grams of baking powder and 10 grams of baking soda. I'm going to dissolve these before I add them to the dough, so I'll add a few tablespoons of our water to each one and give them a stir until they're dissolved. By doing this separately, it's going to help our dough puff up more. Now let's add both the mixtures and the rest of the water a bit at a time, stirring with the spatula to combine it. Now that it's coming together, I'll mix it with my hands. That brings us to our second step to successful youtiaos. Don't over knead. We're just going to knead it for 1 to 2 minutes. At this point, we want our dough to be rough. I'm going to cover it and let it rest for 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, let's give this another knead. Youtiaos are usually eaten with breakfast in China and in most parts of Southeast Asia. They're kind of like the Asian version of donuts and coffee, but instead of coffee, they're eaten with warm soy milk. I really miss grabbing a hot cup of freshly made soy milk in China and dipping the youtiao in it. It's a really great combo, so I decided to make a soy milk custard for our eclairs. If that sounds terrible to you, you can just whip up some whipping cream and use that instead, or make a regular custard, a pudding, or whatever you want. Alright, after 1 to 2 minutes of kneading, our dough is a bit smoother, but not 100% smooth. That's good, that's what we want. I'll let it rest for another 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, another 1 to 2 minute knead. And now it's very smooth, but we'll give it another 20 minutes of rest. Okay, one last knead. And now we're ready to roll this out until it's about 1 centimeter thick. I got this recipe from a great YouTube channel called Helen's Recipes. She cooks a lot of Vietnamese food on her channel. You can find a link to it in the description below the video. Alright, cover it with a damp cloth and we're going to let it rest for about 3.5 hours now. While that's happening, let's make our soy milk custard. I'll start with an egg, add 4 tablespoons of sugar, and 2 tablespoons of flour. And slowly add about 200 milliliters of soy milk, a bit at a time, whisking it together as we go. Now it's into the microwave for just 3 minutes. This is coming from a recipe I found on cookpad.com. I'll include a link in the description. It's really simple, it just uses the microwave to heat it. After our 3 minutes, another vigorous mix. Then another 2.5 minutes in the microwave. And another mix. Now we'll add a few drops of vanilla extract and combine it. Pretty thick, too thick. I'm going to add some more soy milk, whisk, and repeat until it's creamier and less pasty. That's pretty good. It's a good level of sweetness and you can actually taste the soy. I'll toss this into the fridge until we're ready to assemble. Okay, it's finally been 3.5 hours and now it's time to finish our youtiao. I'll roll it out thinner so it's about a 1/2 centimeter thick, cut it into strips that are around 10 centimeters wide, about 1/3 of a foot. And now I'm cutting each strip into an inch-long piece. With a wet bamboo skewer, make an indentation in the middle of one strip. Then stack an equal-sized strip on top of it. And press the stick into the middle of the 2 stacked strips. We're going to repeat this process until all the strips have been stacked. The stick indentations on the dough is going to help the 2 strips stick together, but it also helps with the separation on the sides. We're ready to fry. A good inch or 2 of oil in a pot. We want the oil temperature to be around 180 degrees Celsius. If you don't have a thermometer, put the dry end of a wooden skewer in, and if it bubbles up around it, you should be good to go. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to hold the dough strip on both sides and stretch it until it's about double the length, then carefully place it in the oil. Let's keep this moving in the oil, flipping it, moving it side to side so the oil covers it. And I'll help it separate on its seams by pulling it apart slightly with my tongs. It's supposed to puff up, but if it doesn't, then you'll want to let the dough rest longer. Mine is kind of puffing up, but it's not perfect. You want it to kind of look like 2 sticks attached. When it's golden brown, take it out and let it sit on a surface where the excess oil can drip off of it. And then repeat with all the pieces. One more to go. I wish they had puffed up more, but they're still pretty airy, and I'm sure they'll be delicious. They're not getting the separation between the 2 pieces that I was hoping for. There's actually a story behind this. There was a much-loved Chinese general who was in a disagreement with the prime minister at the time. The prime minister's name was Qin. So Qin and his wife came up with a plan to fabricate some charges against the general, and the general was executed. The people were not happy about it. They hated Qin and they loved the general. So some dough maker decided to put 2 sticks of dough together, name them after Qin and his wife, and then throw them in hot bubbling oil to fry them. The people loved it, and youtiaos quickly became popular across China. Also, be careful not to splash hot oil on your hands while making these. Okay, youtiaos are done. I've got about 20 here. I'm going to freeze most of them to eat later, but let's do up some eclairs. The word éclair in French actually means lightning or a flash of lightning. It got its name because people tend to eat eclairs in a flash. This kind of works with youtiaos too because they're 10 times better if they're eaten right away. They go soggy fast, so I'm going to make my chocolate sauce as quickly as possible. I'll start heating up a 1/2 cup of heavy cream. I don't want this to boil, I just want to get it hot so it melts the chocolate. I've got 100 grams of dark chocolate broken up here. I'll pour our hot cream over the chocolate and let it sit for a minute. Meanwhile, let's put our soy custard into a sandwich bag, which will act as a pastry bag. Okay, let's stir our chocolate and cream and combine it into something beautiful. Delicious! And it's time to assemble. So originally my plan was to fill the natural gap in the youtiaos with the custard, but mine didn't really get the separation I was hoping for. Normally an eclair has the filling piped right inside of it, or it's cut and kind of sandwiched in it. So I think I'll copy that method, but instead of cutting them, I'll just use 2 and make a custard sandwich. I'll snip the corner of my custard bag and we'll pipe it out generously. Put another youtiao on top, and then I'll drizzle the chocolate on it. This would make the French angry, and the Chinese would probably just laugh at me. I think we can do better. That looks good enough to eat. Oh yeah, that's delicious. The youtiaos are definitely not perfect, but it still works with the eclair. The soy milk custard is actually really nice. I'm getting some flashbacks to China. That soy milk taste that maybe takes a bit of getting used to. It's an earthier taste, but I really like it. Sarah, you want to try some eclair? What do you think?
This is the greatest thing I've ever tasted. You're definitely getting sex tonight.
Well, there you have it. Another delicious fusion. My youtiaos are a bit pathetic. I'll have to work on that. Maybe a longer resting time and a bit less kneading. There's also an ingredient that helps them get crispier that I wasn't able to source. It's called baking ammonium or ammonium carbonate. If you can get it, use 5 grams of it instead of baking powder, and then only add 5 grams of baking soda instead of 10. I guess that's it. I'll be back soon with another Far East fusion, so make sure you're subscribed and do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Apparently that's going to help my content get seen by more eyes, which will encourage me to make more content, and I'll get fat faster, which is really all I want.